see it everywhere. People who know better but don't do better. People with brilliant ideas, big dreams, thoughtful plans, but very little follow through. And you start to wonder, how can that be? How can someone spend years learning, thinking, preparing, and still never move? Still never follow through? Still never do what they already know to do? Well, I'll tell you what I've discovered. There's a gap. A quiet little gap between knowing and doing. And that gap is where most dreams die. It doesn't happen with a loud crash. It's not some big failure, some dramatic mistake. No, most dreams die silently. They fade away in the space between I should and I did. They disappear in the pause between intention and action. And if you're not careful, that space becomes your whole life. A life full of good intentions and missed opportunities. A life of, I could have, I almost, I was planning to. That's not the life you want. It's not the life anyone wants, but it's the life most people get. Not because they didn't know what to do, but because they never did what they knew. And it's a painful realization to look back and realize that it wasn't lack of information. It wasn't lack of opportunity. It wasn't even bad luck that held you back. It was hesitation, delay, excuses. That quiet decision to stay in motionless comfort rather than move into the discomfort of action. Now, I'm not saying knowledge doesn't matter. Of course it does. But knowledge is just the seed. It's not the harvest. It's not the fruit. To get the results, you have to act. You have to move. You have to do. This seminar is not about motivation. It's not about more knowledge. It's not about waiting for the right time or hoping for the right mood. It's about closing the gap, the one between knowing and doing, because that gap is the difference between who you are and who you could become. And every day you leave that gap unaddressed, the life you really want slips further away. This is your opportunity to close that gap, deliberately, consciously, permanently, to stop rehearsing and start building, to stop preparing and start practicing, to stop waiting and start doing. Because once you begin doing, even imperfectly, even inconsistently, you step out of theory and into transformation. And that's where the real progress begins. Knowledge is everywhere. It's in your pocket. It's on your bookshelf. It's in the conversations you've already had. There's no shortage of books, courses, audio tapes, or advice. And yet, despite all this knowledge, very few people actually change. Very few people take what they know and put it into practice long enough to see results. You can go to the bookstore right now and find 100 books on money, on health, on relationships, on time management. The problem isn't lack of information. That hasn't been the problem for a long time. The problem is that knowing has become a substitute for doing. People feel good because they read a chapter, or watched a video, or listened to a talk. And for a moment, they get the emotional reward that normally comes from action, without actually doing anything. It's like reading about push-ups and feeling like you worked out. You didn't. But your brain got just enough stimulation to think you did. You see, knowledge without action is deceptive. It creates the illusion of progress. You feel like you're growing, but you're not. You're collecting insight, but insight doesn't change your body. Insight doesn't build a business. Insight doesn't save money. Insight doesn't fix habits. Only action does that. Most people don't need another breakthrough idea. They already have the right idea. What they need is to act on it, apply it, repeat it. Keep doing it long enough to see results. And that's where they fall short. Not in understanding, but in execution. Years ago, I met a man who had read more than 400 books on business. He could quote authors, recite strategies, break down models. He had notebooks filled with plans, graphs, and timelines. But when I asked him what he had built, He looked down. Nothing. He hadn't built anything. Why? Because knowledge alone doesn't build. Action does. And for all his learning, he had never moved. He never crossed the gap. You don't get credit for what you know. The world pays for what you do, for what you deliver, for what you follow through on. That's why someone with less knowledge, but more discipline, will always outperform the person with great knowledge, but no consistent action. The most dangerous place to be is thinking you're making progress when you're really just circling the runway. You keep reading, you keep planning, you keep preparing, but you never take off. You never get airborne. Why? Because motion is not progress. Learning is not growth. Thinking is not building. Only action crosses that line. If all it took was knowing, everyone would be rich, fit, and fulfilled. But that's not how it works. Knowing is the easy part. Doing is where the work begins. That's where the resistance shows up. That's where excuses start to creep in. That's where you find out if you're serious or just interested. So ask yourself, what do you already know that you still haven't done? What habit have you studied, talked about, written down, but not practiced? What opportunity have you researched but not acted on? That's the gap. That's the difference between staying where you are and stepping into what's next. Don't confuse learning with living. Don't confuse studying with doing. At some point, you've got to stop consuming and start executing. At some point, you've got to stop gathering information and start applying it. That's the moment everything starts to change. So the question is, if people already know what to do, why don't they do it? And the answer, more often than not, isn't lack of motivation. It's fear. It's hesitation. It's the comfort of staying where it's safe. Because as long as you're still planning, you can't fail. As long as you're still getting ready, you don't have to face the possibility that it might not work. You see, knowing feels safe. Knowing keeps you protected. You can live in theory forever and never risk embarrassment, never risk failure, never risk finding out that your best effort still wasn't enough. That's why people stay stuck. Not because they don't want progress, but because they're afraid of what doing might reveal. There's a kind of security in preparation. You can stay busy. You can stay occupied. You can look productive. And from the outside, it even appears like you're making progress. But deep down, you're circling. You're avoiding the one thing that actually moves the needle: execution. Perfectionism is another trap. People think if they can't do it perfectly, they shouldn't do it at all. They spend so much time trying to figure out the best method, the perfect plan, the right moment, that they miss the opportunity to make progress with what they already have. And the irony is, the only way to get better at something is to do it badly at first. You'll never perfect something you don't practice. But perfectionists wait. They keep sharpening the pencil until there's no lead left. And still, the paper is blank. Because perfection isn't the goal. Movement is. And until you're willing to be imperfect, you won't be consistent. And if you're not consistent, you won't be successful. Then there's overwhelm. People say they don't know where to start, so they don't start. They look at the entire mountain instead of just the next step. They think about the whole book they want to write instead of just the first page. They worry about losing 50 pounds instead of walking around the block. But every big change is made up of small actions. And if you focus on the next small action, you can bypass the overwhelm completely. Sometimes the problem is overconsumption. People are addicted to input. More advice, more videos, more techniques. But there's a limit. If all you do is take in, eventually you become so bloated with information, you can't move. You become a collector of knowledge instead of a practitioner. And no matter how much you know, none of it matters until you use it. Procrastination is another reason people stay stuck. They think they're putting it off until later. But the truth is, they're avoiding the discomfort that comes with starting. Because starting means dealing with doubt, awkwardness, and resistance. So they delay. Not because they're lazy, but because they're avoiding that first moment of friction. But here's the thing. If you can just start, just take that first step, everything after that gets easier. And for some people, it's not fear or perfectionism or even procrastination. It's comfort. They've grown comfortable in the current routine, even if that routine isn't producing the results they want. Change requires disruption. It requires energy. It requires effort. And it's easier to stay where things are familiar, even if they're unfulfilling. But you have to ask yourself, is comfort worth your future? Is the ease of today worth the regret of tomorrow? Because every day you stay stuck in knowing you're giving up ground. You're trading movement for maintenance. And maintenance never creates progress. You were not built to rehearse forever. You weren't meant to sit on the edge of potential, planning and preparing while your opportunities expire. You were built to move, to try, to apply, to do. And everything you want, growth, success, impact, it all lives on the other side of doing. So now the illusion has to end. Knowing is not enough. You know that. You've seen it. You've felt it. And now you understand why people stay stuck. Because staying stuck feels safer than stepping into the unknown. But safety is not success. Safety is not progress. Safety is not freedom. If you want change, you've got to break the pattern. You've got to stop settling for the security of knowing and start building the courage to do. That's the only way forward. That's the only way the gap gets closed. Most people are waiting to feel ready before they start, waiting to feel confident, waiting to feel motivated. But here's what I've found. Those feelings don't show up first. They show up later. They don't lead the process. They follow it. You don't act because you're motivated. You get motivated because you act. You don't move because you're confident. You build confidence by moving. The feelings everyone waits for are produced by doing, not the other way around. And the people who figure that out, they stop waiting. They stop hesitating. They start. Discipline is what bridges that gap. Discipline is doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It doesn't negotiate. Discipline just shows up and does the work. You know what separates amateurs from professionals? It's not talent. It's not resources. It's not even intelligence. It's discipline. Amateurs act when they feel like it. Professionals act because it's time to act. They don't let feelings decide the schedule. They don't let moods determine movement. They move no matter what. You don't need to be extraordinary to start doing. You just need to be committed. You need to decide that showing up matters more than feeling good. You need to decide that action matters more than comfort. You need to decide that the life you want is worth more than the excuses you've been using to avoid it. Doing doesn't require perfection. That's another trap. People think they can't start until they know how to do it flawlessly. But here's the truth. Nothing is flawless in the beginning. Doing is messy. Doing is clumsy. Doing is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. The only way to get good at something is to first be willing to be bad at it. Discipline says, I'll do it anyway. I'll show up tired. I'll show up uncertain. I'll show up nervous. But I'll show up. And if you keep showing up, you build something powerful. You build resilience. You build momentum. You build identity. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who tries and start becoming someone who follows through. And that identity matters. When doing becomes part of who you are, you don't have to force it anymore. You don't have to argue with yourself every day. You just do. Like brushing your teeth, like tying your shoes, like showing up to work. It becomes automatic. And that's the goal. Not to force action forever, but to practice it long enough that it becomes part of you. Most people are trying to feel their way into action, but the real path is acting your way into feeling. Show up first. Confidence will come later. Do it tired. Energy will come later. Do it afraid. Courage will come later. The emotions you're looking for live on the other side of movement. So start small. One action, one task, one habit. Don't wait to feel ready. Just begin. Keep your actions simple. Keep your promises to yourself. And every time you follow through, you prove to yourself that you're serious, that you're building something, that you're becoming the kind of person who does. And that's what changes everything. Not talent, not knowledge, not a perfect plan. What changes everything is consistent action, repeated disciplines, quiet, unglamorous follow-through. Not once in a while, daily. That's how the gap gets closed. That's how knowing becomes doing. That's how dreams stop dying and start becoming real. People are always waiting for the right time, waiting for the new year, waiting for Monday, waiting for the pressure to ease up, waiting for motivation to strike, waiting until it feels right. And while they wait, time passes, opportunities fade, dreams get dusty, and life keeps moving. You've probably heard people say it's just not a good time right now. But think about it. When is it ever a good time? When is it ever convenient to change your life? When does the calendar clear, the stress vanish, and the skies open up to say, now's the perfect moment? It doesn't happen because perfect conditions don't exist. The right time is not a date. It's a decision. That's the only way anything important ever begins. Not because everything lined up perfectly, but because someone decided to stop waiting and start moving. They said, ready or not, I'm going. And that moment, that decision is what makes the difference. People disguise fear as planning. They call it timing. They call it wisdom. But underneath, it's hesitation. It's the part of you that wants progress without discomfort, growth without effort, results without risk. But you and I both know it doesn't work like that. If you're not willing to start when it's messy, uncertain, and inconvenient, you'll never start at all. Action doesn't begin when you're ready. It begins when you're committed. Committed to the outcome. Committed to the process. Committed to doing it now, not later. Because later turns into never. And the longer you wait, the harder it gets. You don't need perfect conditions. You need a decision. You need a step. You need to decide that you're starting today. You may not know everything. You might not feel ready, but you're not going to sit in the same spot another year hoping for perfect. That's how you cross the gap. That's how progress begins. You'll never feel 100% ready. That's not how the mind works. It's wired for safety. It will always find a reason to wait. It will always point to some detail that's not quite in place yet. But your future is not waiting for your comfort. It's waiting for your courage. It's waiting for you to step, ready or not. I've seen people wait their entire lives for the right moment. And I've seen others start before they were ready and change everything. Not because they had it figured out, but because they figured it out as they went. You don't have to be perfect. just have to be in motion. Don't wait for the fear to disappear. It won't. Do it afraid. Don't wait for the plan to be flawless. It won't be. Do it uncertain. Don't wait for conditions to be ideal. They rarely are. Do it anyway. Because the act of doing creates clarity. It creates experience. It creates results. And all those things you've been waiting for, they show up after you begin, not before. Every day you wait, you strengthen hesitation. You teach your mind that delay is acceptable, that comfort is more important than growth. But every time you act, especially when it's inconvenient, you build a different pattern, a pattern of movement, a pattern of progress, a pattern of success. So forget about waiting for the right conditions. Start under the wrong ones. Start when it's messy. Start when you're unsure. Start when it's uncomfortable, because that's the only way anything ever gets built. And the truth is, most of the things you admire, businesses, careers, strong relationships, they were all started by people who began under less than perfect conditions. The gap between knowing and doing doesn't close with more time. It closes with action. It closes with the willingness to begin before everything is ready. And once you do, the momentum begins. The clarity comes. The results follow. Not because it was the right time, but because you decided not to wait any longer. Everybody wants a shortcut. Everyone's looking for the hack, the secret, the one move that'll fast track everything. But the real shortcut, the only shortcut, is daily. It's not a trick. It's not hidden. It's not complicated. It's consistency. Small, simple actions repeated every single day. That's it. You can skip steps. You can delay. You can pause and start over and pause again. But every time you do, it costs you. Every restart resets your momentum. Every pause weakens the habit. Every delay pushes the result further out. And the person who just keeps going, quietly, steadily, they pull ahead. Not because they're faster, not because they're smarter, just because they didn't stop. Success doesn't reward the most intense. It rewards the most consistent. You don't need massive days. You don't need to do everything at once. You just need to do something every day. That's how progress builds. That's how discipline gets stronger. That's how the gap between knowing and doing finally disappears. Most people burn out because they try to do too much, too soon. They get excited, go all in for a few days, and then quit. But the ones who win, they pace themselves. They keep it small, keep it simple, keep it daily. They don't need hype. They don't need a crowd. They just build quietly, one day at a time. I've seen it over and over again. Someone reads a book, goes to a seminar, gets fired up and says, "That's it, I'm changing everything." They overhaul their schedule, their diet, their finances all in 1 week. And by week 2, it's all gone. Why? Because intensity is exhausting. But discipline is sustainable. Discipline isn't loud. It doesn't make a scene, but it shows up day after day, whether it feels good or not, whether conditions are perfect or not, whether anyone's watching or not. Discipline doesn't care about excitement. It's about decision. It's about follow through. It's about doing the thing, even when you're tired, bored, or distracted. You don't need dramatic progress every day. That's not the goal. The goal is to not go backwards. The goal is to keep moving, to show up, to do the work. Some days will be great. Some days will feel like a grind. That's normal. But if you keep doing, you keep growing, you keep building, and eventually you arrive. It's like compound interest. You don't see the payoff immediately, but over time, the growth becomes undeniable. Day 1 doesn't look like much. Day 10 still feels small. But day 100, day 300, that's when the results show up. That's when people ask you how you did it. And the answer is never glamorous. It's always the same. I just kept going. Doing daily is about rhythm. It's about routine. It's about building a structure that supports your goals. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to debate it. You just do it because it's who you are now. You don't wait to feel like it. You don't ask yourself every day if you want to. You already decided, and now you just follow through. And once you build that rhythm, once the doing becomes automatic, you've already won, because now the gap is gone. You're no longer stuck in knowing. You're not circling, planning, or hesitating. You're living, you're building, you're becoming. Doing daily isn't flashy. It's not impressive at first, but over time, it becomes unstoppable. It becomes the reason you cross the finish line while others are still getting ready to start. It becomes the reason your life begins to look different, not all at once, but one consistent day at a time. You want the shortcut? This is it. Show up, do the work, do it again tomorrow. That's how you win. That's how you build the life you actually want. Not by knowing more, not by waiting longer, but by doing daily, no matter what. You know what you need to do. You've known for a while now. That's not the problem. The problem is the delay, the hesitation, the waiting, the false comfort of knowing without doing. That's where most dreams fall apart. Not from lack of desire, not from lack of knowledge, but from lack of execution. It's easy to get stuck there. You tell yourself you're making progress because you're learning. You convince yourself you're improving because you're planning. But at some point, you got to look in the mirror and ask if you're actually doing it. Not talking about it, not reading about it, not thinking about it, doing it. Because that gap, that quiet little space between knowing and doing, that's where it happens. Or doesn't. That's the turning point. That's where lives change or stay the same. And you get to decide. You always get to decide. So make the decision now. Close the gap. Stop waiting. Stop hoping. Stop preparing forever. Start doing. Start moving. Start building. Start practicing. Do it without the perfect plan. Do it without the perfect conditions. Do it without waiting to feel ready. Just begin. The difference between knowing and doing is everything. It's the difference between almost and actually, between potential and progress, between the life you talk about and the life you live. So take the next step today, not tomorrow, not later, today. Even if it's small, even if it's uncertain, even if it's uncomfortable, take it. Because once you start doing, everything changes.